My name is Jeanie Davis, and I'm an apartment owner and manager. It was a referral from my brother, and my brother also works in real estate. So I met him, I think it was 19 years ago. He had purchased one or two apartment buildings from Terry Moore, and then when I had the interest in investing, he recommended Terry, and I met with Terry face to face. I found him to be very honest, and he always presented all the facts to me, which I like, and then gave us a lot of freedom to choose which properties we were interested in, what our own evaluation of the property was, and then we could communicate back and forth about if I had any concerns or any issues regarding an escrow. I just found he always returned my telephone calls. He was very honest in any of my dealings with him, and he has a very high standard of ethics. I've never received false information from him, and in the real estate industry, there's times that people present things a certain way to encourage you to buy or don't disclose certain information. And whenever I've asked a question, if he doesn't have the answer immediately, he will search to find the answer to it, even if it takes a couple days and extra time and effort. So in that way, his honesty, he carries through with things. The third time, I asked him, can you tell me what you think this building is actually valued at and what would be a fair price for both buyer and seller? And he did, and that was a building that went just smooth as can be. The seller was a little problematic, and we were doing a 1031 exchange, and we weren't quite finished, and we needed an extension on our own escrow with that seller for another 20 days before our funds would be able to be funded to him. And so Terry, what I liked about that instance is that Terry asked if we could have a face-to-face meeting with the seller because the seller wasn't inclined to extend. And so my brother and I met with Terry at the table with the seller and his broker. And we just ironed out that, in fact, A, we really want to buy your property. B, we can conclude in 15 to 20 days. And then we negotiated, and at 24 hours later, the seller concurred that we could go ahead with the escrow after putting up a little more funds. So the face-to-face meeting was great in terms of being able to just level buyer to seller and having someone like Terry as a negotiator, mediator. On a scale of 1 to 10, that's often how I use, in anything that I write. I would say he's 9.5. He tries to just get at what each party is interested in achieving. And I had that experience, with him, with this problematic seller. But I think he negotiates on my behalf if I'm interested in doing a new purchase. He will list, the assets that the buyer has, the assets the seller has, or what the seller's looking for, so we can kind of try to find some common ground. And that's probably one of the finest characteristics. He didn't pressure us to find a building and act on it. He kind of encouraged us to look for 2 or 3 months just at what things actually sell for. And that is all occurred prior to our first purchase, where we identified the area we were comfortable in and, analyzed our own cash flow. And so he was helpful in that process by answering any questions per zip code. I learned to take very seriously the importance and your own responsibility with evaluating rental property and not jumping into something or some market you don't know. I learned that things can go wrong in escrows, and I learned to evaluate the cash flow, and if it was a property that needed a lot of maintenance, how to figure how and when the improvements would be made over the first couple years. I learned a lot about how to analyze a property, and Terry was helpful in initially helping me understand certain things about the cap rate or and how cash flow worked, and to never actually trust a seller's opinion of how cash flow would work. So then after you have a building or two, you can understand that a little more clearly based on your own facts that you have from cost analysis. I learned a lot. There is one unusual thing that I learned, which was directly, I have to say, accolades for Terry. I had refinanced one of my properties to put cash into another purchase, and I signed documents, and the escrow company was in receipt of the cash to supply to the bank. We were in escrow on a 7-unit building, and at that time the escrow company closed their doors, so my cash was in La La Land, and we were in the middle of an escrow. And so I know both seller and Terry were anxious to close, and it was promised that in 10 days or 14 days that would that it would rectify and we'd get our cash as we had signed a document for. But Terry was very clear that, you know, things might be up in the air and it wasn't in our best interest or the seller's best interest for us to continue. So we very gracefully backed out of that particular deal. But I do appreciate his no pressure in a very trying situation for me. Oh, I would say he's kind of fun. He tells little anecdotes that kind of emphasize, little stories that he tells that emphasize a certain way it is in real estate. He's very honest, considerate, and he does what he says he's going to do. He does effective research, and again, there is no pressure as a buyer to pressure you into buying something that you really aren't comfortable with. So I think he's highly ethical across all boards, and yeah, I would highly recommend him. He knows his market very well, and sometimes if I'm considering a purchase in a different zip code, I would ask him to provide the details about how much a building was selling for in that particular, buildings in that zip code. And he does at the end of the month and end of the quarter data on the different zip codes, which as a buyer, that's really good knowledge for me to have at my fingertips. If he didn't know something, he does the necessary research or has someone that works for him do the research.